you willing to put aside all speculation and announce to the people here that you are not running in 2020? No.
Overall, wages are down. People are working longer hours for less money. Obama keeps current illegal immigrants.
African Americans being mistreated in society.
Noting that world leaders laughed at President Trump.
Thanks to the president's growing trade war.
You know what it is? Our new slogan, 2020. Keep America great.
Hello, you're listening to 2020 Vision, the United States Study Centre's regular dose of presidential politics as we edge ever closer to the 2020 US presidential election. My name is Drew Sheldrick. We're going to use our last episode of the year as a wrap on some of the big events and issues that shaped the Trump administration and American politics in general in 2018, particularly those likely to bleed over into next year and have an impact on the 2020 campaign. My guest today was a former congressional advisor to the Democratic Party during President Obama's first term and also served as Chief of Staff to former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard. These days, you'll likely see him pop up on Sky News talking all things Trump and American politics, but before we meet him, here's a little taste of some of the big events in foreign policy this year.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. How are you? We're going to have a great year. It'll be a fantastic 2018.
It looks very much like the trade war fears are very real.
25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum.
Retaliation starting today. China will slap tariffs on $3 billion with U.S. goods.
Trump just announced that he's imposing 10% tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods.
There doesn't seem to be any quick resolution of this thing, and the president is pretty resolute.
U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement, and we're calling it USMCA. We've started talking to North Korea directly.
This marks the first ever meeting between a sitting president of the U.S. and a North Korean leader.
What happens here over the next few days could begin the process to eliminate one of the gravest threats facing the world.
They stopped shooting missiles over Japan. They stopped all nuclear tests.
Well, let's be very clear. Kim Jong-un hasn't declared anything.
These satellite photos show that Kim Jong-un's regime is making improvements to at least a dozen hidden ballistic missile bases.
Pictures coming in, a warning. They are difficult to look at. Children being hosed off, treated after an alleged chemical attack in Duma.
These are not the actions of a man. They are crimes of a monster instead.
President Trump ordering strikes on Syria.
Chilling new developments in the disappearance of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi.
We're going to get to the bottom.
If he doesn't, Congress will. That I can tell you.
We are with Saudi Arabia. We're staying with Saudi Arabia. And by the way, just so everybody, I have no business whatsoever with Saudi Arabia. Couldn't care less.
Bruce Wolpe, thank you very much for joining us for our final episode of the year.
Drew, great to be here, and thank you so much.
In the conclusion of that little foreign policy wrap we heard just then, President Trump was reaffirming his support for the US-Saudi Arabia relationship, despite the horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist and a resident of the United States. You wrote a piece for the ABC last month about this sort of whole affair and Trump's response and how it showed us what America First really meant. I wondered if you could give us a little more information on what you meant by that. I guess we're used to hearing that term in regards to economic and trade issues and less so something like human rights and diplomacy.
What we see with President Trump when he engages with foreign leaders is, what are you doing for me? Mm-hmm. And what are you doing for the United States? And everything becomes very transactional. What's the input and outflows of trade? How much investment are you making in the country? How many jobs are you creating? How many factories are you opening? And so America First is, first, you're going to deal with the United States, and that's what I care about. Mm-hmm. And everywhere he goes, when he beats up on Europe, because the United States has to pay to help assist the defense of Europe, yeah. And when they're sending cars to the United States at favorable tariff rates and so forth, taking American car jobs, the president says. Mm-hmm. And so similarly with the Saudis, he sees the Saudis as a major partner in his strategic vision for the Middle East. They are the counterweight to Iran. They are the counter to Iran. Mm-hmm. They could help reach ties with Israel and then advance the peace process. And in exchange for, and along with that, he has asked for, and the Saudis to curry favor with Trump. They want to make major investments in the United States, buy a lot of American goods, and particularly weapons and so forth. Yes. So that whole premise was tested when you have blood on your hands from the murder of Khashoggi, mm-hmm. and where that blood seems to land right in the highest echelons of the Saudi kingdom, yes. and possibly involving the crown prince. And when that happens, it's funny how sometimes the death death of one in a world of woe, Yemen and Syria and the Rohingyas and what's happening to Christians in China, in a world of woe, the death of one man can seem to capture the concern, attention, and outrage of everyone, and that has landed back in Riyadh. Mm-hmm. And so, and it's really forced in the United States. It's an eruption of concern has come about because of this, and people are saying, "What is the relationship with the Saudis? Shouldn't they be accountable? Should there be some punishment? And where does that lead?" Mm-hmm. And so you have moves in Congress. First, you had findings by the CIA. It's likely that the Crown Prince was involved, and then moves in Congress to which we will see in the coming weeks, to cut off U.S. aid for the war in Yemen, mm-hmm. and also to suspend arms shipments, and a rebuke of the Crown Prince directly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's all coming to, and what Trump is saying is, I'm sorry, America first means that we have to have this strategic relationship, and nothing else can disturb it. And if he had his druthers, nothing would disturb it. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be a moment of further truth here as to what the Trump-Saudi relationship is and how far it can go on the strategic directions that he's outlined.
We had Charles Edel in the last episode talking a little bit about Trump's attention potentially turning more to these foreign policy issues post-midterms because his domestic agenda might be hindered by the Democrats who now control the House of Representatives. Is that a view that you share as well?
Possibly. I think wherever he goes on the international stage, when he chooses to do it, mm-hmm. he's going to advance this American First agenda. He will be very disruptive in Europe. He will try and achieve major things when he has the opportunity, such as with President Xi mm-hmm. in Buenos Aires. And he's bedded down a new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. So he's going to keep doing that. Mm-hmm. Other presidents under siege have found refuge in foreign policy, going back to Nixon. I remember shortly before he resigned, he went to Egypt for a triumphant tour of Egypt. Right. And that got him really big headlines. Check it out.
Yeah, how Napoleonic.
And so where Trump can go overseas and be praised, yes. The problem is in a lot of places, in places that he wants to go where he'd be praised, such as Russia. Yeah. He has some political problems in getting there. Yeah. But I still think his America First agenda really resonates at home mm-hmm. with his base. Yeah. And I think his focus, notwithstanding the attraction of foreign opportunities, he's really going to focus on the base and what he's doing for it within the coming election.
Okay. Of all the sort of foreign policy issues that we saw this year, sort of the big news, can you see any of them sort of affecting the 2020 campaign, sort of continuing into next year? I don't know, sort of the US-China trade war or North Korea or anything in particular you can see as having a bit more of a shelf life?
Well, in two ways. If things go well, such as if North Korea really turns out to have a meaningful negotiation, they can make some progress, that would be a very big deal. Yeah. And frankly, everyone hopes that it will. Mm-hmm. But if things go badly, if he likes to attack the second President Bush for 9/11 happening mm-hmm. on his watch. Yeah. If something happens on Trump's watch, he won't like blame, but I think people could blame him. Mm-hmm. But I really do think that the foreign implications would be on what it means for the economic security of the country, what it means for jobs, investment, trade, and so forth. Right.
Before we get into more of these sort of US domestic politics issues, let's hear some of the issues that really dominated the political discourse within America over the past 12 months.
911, what is your emergency? Hi, my daughter just texted me from school. She's at Stillman Douglas. There's an active shooter.
And next thing you know, everybody looks, and then you hear boom, 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 and I just ran as fast as I could to the nearest forest so I could hide.
Look at me and tell me guns were the factor.
That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS!
The U.S. eastern seaboard is now feeling the wrath of Hurricane Florence.
It's almost impossible to describe the destruction from Hurricane Michael here on Mexico Beach.
It's already America's deadliest wildfire in a century.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
It just came, Karen, in a real hurry. All of paradise is burned.
These mothers who cross the border illegally being separated from their children.
We should be able to agree that we will not keep kids in child internment camps. This is the United States of America.
We called up the military because we're not going to let people come into our country illegally.
There are hundreds of migrants here who have left their squalid camp and are trying to make it towards the border, towards an official point of entry.
From the U.S. side, tear gas,
fired toward the migrants, among them what appeared to be mothers with young children.
Immigration continued to be President Trump's sort of signature issue domestically this year. It was the cornerstone of his 2016 campaign. It was an issue in the midterms with that migrant caravan story. Bruce, is this going to continue all the way to 2020? Is it going to be a signature issue for him?
I think so. I mean, when he announced his candidacy, that was the first thing that he said. I'm going to build a wall with Mexico. They're going to pay for it, and also you should be very afraid of all these people coming into the country.
Yep.
In the last days of the last couple weeks of the midterm elections, he turned to immigration repeatedly. He sent troops to the border. They put down barbed wire.
Yep.
Very visible moves, and I think, and he feels that he's been consistent over 20 years, 30 years. About that policy. He's not going to abandon it.
Yeah.
He also thinks it really helps him. I mean, Noel Pearson used to say that people, I believe it was Noel Pearson, I haven't completely tracked this down, that he used to say people have two buttons, a good button and a bad button, and leaders can push either button.
Yeah.
And Trump keeps pushing bad buttons. The larger issue here, larger picture here in pushing the immigration button is a president uniting the country or dividing the country?
Yeah.
And Trump has done nothing. I think really to the despair of people who care about the country and its future, people who, when you have a John McCain pass away and a George H.W. Bush pass away, kind of look back on those days and saying, well, we weren't so divided. We had a president that could stand for people and bring people together and so forth, and that is what a president should do. And they're not seeing that with Trump. But I think he believes in the relentless pushing of these buttons in order to maximize his base and win those states in the Electoral College. He did it before. He thinks he can do it again.
Yeah.
And I don't see any change. He's 72 years old. He is very fixed in his ways. Nothing since being president has really changed.
No,
he is the same. He is the person. He's one of the most honest presidents we've ever had.
Right.
So, and people are making up their minds on it. But I think he's going to stay with the program.
Will Trump actually get this big, beautiful wall with Mexico, do you think, sometime in the next 2 years, or will it start? I mean...
if he didn't get it when the Republicans had control of Congress, I don't see who's going to get it when the Democrats have control of the House. Democrats are not going to give $5 billion. Let me put it this way. If I'm Nancy Pelosi, and I will never be Nancy Pelosi, and, she is really tough. I'm going to get a hell of a lot for it, and it's going to be a lot more than something on DACA, the Dreamers. And so I think he will try and eke out in a tactical fight what he can to have the wall built. But it is, his base really does believe in the rallying cry, and he will keep that going.
Yeah, well, this works for him, right? If it doesn't get built, it can come 2020. Here's another issue.
He can blame it. Right, re-elect me, and we will get it built.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is the same. You are afraid of the problem. I'm in command on this problem, and that's what I want.
We should really talk about staffing within the White House as well. Over the weekend, we saw White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly retire. We also saw Attorney General Jeff Sessions go straight after the midterms. That Chief of Staff role in particular is going to be pivotal for Trump's next 2 years and sort of ensuring discipline in what is sort of often a dysfunctional White House. Who is going to want that job?
I don't think the president's looking for discipline. Right. I think the president's looking that Trump can be Trump.
Yeah.
And Kelly came in, you'll recall, after the first few chaotic months under Reince Priebus in the administration. Apparently I wished I was there. Anyone could walk into the Oval Office and say hello to the president.
Yeah, biographers,
plant an idea bomb and see what would happen. And that was a big deal. And clearly when he brought in Kelly, he wanted more order and discipline. But there are limits. And certainly over time, that situation has degraded. And what you can see just on reports of the president's, how he wants to spend time and what he wants to do, he's in control of his office, of his time, of his Twitter feed, of his media interaction, of who he calls, when he calls them, what he wants to discuss. And so that's what he wants. Now, I think he's going to play offense and defense. Offense in terms of I'm running in 2020 and I want a top political operation. And defense, those crazy Democrats are going to be after me when they take control in January. So he needs a chief of staff at least that will help manage those two things. So Nick Ayers, who is Vice President Pence's chief of staff, was very attractive because he's a hot political
his
commodity.
Name was thrown around on the weekend.
But when you think about other people who have served as chiefs of staff, and there have been poor ones and good ones, but when you think about the Jim Bakers, the Howard Bakers, the Leon Panettas, you're looking for really seasoned players who know the U.S. government, know foreign governments, know politics, and can bring all of that knowledge and discipline into the Oval Office so that the president has a better chance of accomplishing more of what he wants than without those people.
Yeah.
I don't think Trump is going to go down that road. Now, of people being considered, they're heavyweights, Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, Mike Mulvaney, the Budget Director, Robert Lighthizer, the Trade Representative. I was thinking about it just before coming on with you. My favorite would be Kevin McCarthy, who was the House Republican leader, just elected to succeed Paul Ryan as not as speaker, but as leader.
Yeah.
But McCarthy is a seasoned lawmaker, knows Trump really well because of the work on the tax bill and the whole legislative agenda.
Right.
So he knows politics and he's an adult. And if I'm McCarthy, I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to be in power for the next 2 years. I'm probably not going to be in power for another 4 years.
Yeah.
And so do I want to hang around and be minority leader for 4 years? So that's my long shot bet. Take the odds now, 100 to 1. Put your money in. Let's see what happens.
So Nikes is out, right? So we heard this morning, but just before recording, that he'd said that he wanted to spend more time with his family. I think it was in Georgia, or
he is from Georgia. He wants to play a role in politics there. I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up as running for governor of Georgia or a Senate race in Georgia.
Yep.
So he'll be out there, and he couldn't commit. He said to the president, it's reported, I'll stay with you for 3 months, but not longer.
Yeah.
And the job really requires the next 2 years. And Ayers says it's unfair to you. And so he took himself out.
No wrap of 2018 would be complete without a look at Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. So let's hear a few of the many twists and turns in that unfolding drama this year.
A grand jury in the District of Columbia today returned an indictment presented by the Special Counsel's Office. The indictment charges 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies for committing federal crimes while seeking to interfere in the United States political system, including the 2016 presidential
election.
George
Papadopoulos, the first Trump campaign advisor to be arrested, is now heading to jail.
The judge has announced that this jury found Paul Manafort guilty on 8 counts.
Pleads guilty, implicating president.
We're seeing Vladimir Putin arrive. We expect him to then make his way to this meeting, this one-on-one meeting with President Trump.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Tonight, a unanimous warning from the heads of all 6 U.S. intelligence agencies. Russia is at it again.
Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, has submitted his letter of resignation.
Arguably the bigger headline is the fact that Rod Rosenstein no longer has oversight of the Russia investigation.
Matthew Whitaker to be the acting Attorney General.
Sources tell Fox News that President Trump wants William Barr to be his next Attorney General.
Robert Mueller says that Manafort repeatedly lied to prosecutors. Case surprise.
The special counsel again saying that General Michael Flynn gave such good cooperation, so substantial, he should serve no time in jail.
Mr. Mueller and his strike force have examined every aspect of my life.
I was asked a series of questions. I've answered them very easily.
Some say that you could stop all this by declassifying.
I could fire everybody right now.
Bruce, we saw Michael Cohen face what could be significant jail time last week over alleged payments to women in the lead up to the 2016 election. We're likely to see more on Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort this week. What's the mood in the White House now, do you think, at this moment? I mean, is there a sense that the walls are really closing in as we get to the end of this investigation?
If you listen to what he says on Twitter and other things, he is in command and they haven't touched me and there's no collusion and so forth. So I wouldn't say he's in a state of denial, and denial is a really great river in Egypt, but I just don't know whether that's what he's saying publicly. Now, privately, whether he's really concerned, sometimes you kind of intuit these things by looking at pictures of him on television and so forth, and he does not look happy, right? And so and generally, presidents know things before other people know things, and so I think he's being briefed by his lawyers and others as to what's coming, and what's coming can't be good. The Cohen thing is what's happening with Cohen and the special counsel and the pleadings and so forth. There's a legal issue of did Cohen made payments to women, directed payments being made to women to keep them quiet during the campaign, and the allegation is that Trump helped direct those payments. You also had Cohen engaged in business discussions with the Russians about between the Trump Organization, investments in Moscow, building a tower, and so forth. Those discussions continued well after people who knew about it thought they may have ended, almost to the moment when Trump was nominated.
Right. This is sort of in the primary season.
This is through June of 2016. Okay, so the primary season and up to the convention. Yeah. So what's being discussed politically, like right now in Washington, is, well, if the public had known that there were payments made to women to shut them up, and if the public had known that Trump was discussing with Putin or representatives of Putin about business investments in Russia, how would that play in the Republican primaries? You tell me. Yeah. And so would the trajectory of the campaign have been changed if people had known that? And so that just becomes an ongoing political issue. And you also have, in the context of Democrats taking control of the House, as soon as something appears in the papers in the old days, like today, the Republicans would never hold a hearing on it. They believe me, Michael Cohen and others are going to be asked to testify on these matters in front of the House Judiciary Committee. So the echo chamber goes on and on. As to where Mueller ultimately goes, no one knows. I mean, I thought this investigation would be over by the middle of the year, certainly, and well before the midterms. But what is clear is he is forensic, he is methodical, and everyone who looks at this as how a prosecutor is acting is giving him the highest marks for decorum, deportment, and the legal gravitas behind what he's doing. So all we can say is there's much more to come. And although you have a sense it's close, the two main things are, did the Trump campaign cooperate with the Russians in a conspiracy and WikiLeaks to damage Hillary Clinton's campaign? And then was there obstruction of justice in terms of the firing of James Comey and others in preventing an investigation of these matters? And you have a sense that is coming to a conclusion.
Right. And I mean, that conclusion, I guess, is it likely to be a final report sort of saying, look, these are the allegations, this is what we've found? So will it be one sort of final, all-embracing sort of document?
Based on previous precedent, the answer is yes. And now we have a very interesting opportunity with a new Attorney General, William Barr, who was Attorney General to the first President Bush, George H.W. Bush, in the early 1990s. And so he has to be confirmed by the Senate. And I think that the senators, several senators, certainly the Democrats and some Republicans, as they have him testify before them, will say, what is your position on Mueller? What is your position? What will you do when he has a final report? And what would you do if the president orders you to fire Mueller? And I think his confirmation could be in jeopardy until there is satisfactory answers on that. So the window of Trump being able to act unilaterally on Mueller is closing.
Will Trump attempt to shut down the investigation at any point, do you think, or fire the special counsels? And would Republicans let him get away with it?
That no one knows, because we haven't. The last time we were here was with Nixon. When he was under pressure, he fired Archibald Cox. That was the Saturday Night Massacre. And again, as people intuit Trump's mood as they look at him on television, people wonder, how much pressure can this guy take before he finally whatever? And so are we there? Now, he keeps saying, and his people keep saying, nothing's going to happen to Mueller. And everyone around him says nothing's, and even Rudy Giuliani says nothing's going to happen to Mueller. But you don't know until it does.
Bruce, we'll have to leave the discussion there. We could keep going until 2020, I think, discussing this year.
I'll see you in court.
Yes. Thank you so much for helping us make sense of the year. And I do hope you'll come back and join us in 2019 as things really heat up.
Thank you, and a great Christmas and a great presidential election campaign to come.
Cheers. That's 2020 Vision for the year. We'll be back and broadcasting weekly from January 2019. In the meantime, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud or Spotify. Special thanks to the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Sydney for their assistance with recording, and to the Bubba Brass Band, Ketzer, David Hillowitz and Broke for Free for contributing their musical talents to the show. See you next year.